In my current life with my foundation, I'll say a little more about this in a minute, and the work we do to fight the spread of HIV/AIDS, to fight childhood obesity at home, and come up with economically viable responses to climate change, and promote economic opportunity, and try to create an international network of givers through the Clinton Global Initiative. An enormous amount of what we do is either made possible or leveraged because of the internet. And I understand, therefore, the importance of this meeting. I want to talk to you a little bit today about not only what has happened, but what I think the major questions are going forward, and some things I would selfishly like your help on. The world we live in today is obviously the most interdependent in human history, and it's largely because of the sharing of information and the tearing down of borders. Before World War I, the wealthiest countries in the world were actually as trade dependent as they were before the economic collapse occasioned by the fall of Lehman Brothers and all the things that happened after that. But there was nowhere near the amount of communications and travel and sharing of information, scientific research, culture that there is today. The world we live in today has been good to all of us, otherwise you'd be somewhere else instead of here. But it does have three very significant problems. It is too unequal, and in many places growing more so. It is highly unstable because destructive as well as positive forces now move across borders. The most clear manifestations of it in the last several years obviously have involved the spread of non-state actors promoting terrorist acts, and things like the swine flu scare, and most pertinently for where we are today, the speed with which the global financial crisis developed out of the problems here in the United States. We spread quickly to the UK, and then to Ireland, and then to Iceland, and then before you know it, China with $2 trillion in the bank, they have more now, but then $2 trillion had 35 million unemployed factory workers because of financial crises elsewhere. So it's an unstable environment. And finally, notwithstanding the climate change deniers, I think it's unsustainable because of climate change. I think the way we produce and consume energy cannot be maintained indefinitely into the future. And the whole idea that we can only grow rich, stay rich, and get richer by putting more greenhouse gases into the atmosphere puts us on a path that cannot be maintained without the severest consequences. So the real question is, for me today, whether through totally private action or better government policy or involvement of the non-governmental community, the NGOs, of which I'm a part now, what can we do through the present state and the emerging future of the internet to reduce inequality, to reduce instability, to reduce the unsustainability of the path we're on, so that 25 years from now, somebody else will be here having this meeting, making everything we're going to discuss today look like small potatoes. And I think that ought to be our objective. I worried a lot about unequal access to the internet when I was president. Mark was kind enough to talk about the fact that we try not to overregulate it or overtax it at all. I had a commission that worked in the White House, or a task force on e-commerce, that was headed by a man who now runs our healthcare initiative at the foundation, our Magaziner, and it strongly recommended that we do nothing to interfere with the rapid growth of the internet, that we seed it and try to accelerate it. And that was a good thing, but simultaneously we also worried about using it to maximum benefit of our whole society. So we increased investment in education technology from something like $23 million a year to $870 million a year. And a decade ago, that was still real money. So that by the time I left office, we had gone from 2/3 to 98% of our schools connected to the internet, 3% of our classrooms to 77%. And we developed something called the E-rate to provide discount access through for schools, for hospitals, for rural health clinics, and for libraries, so that information could be more broadly shared. It was worth more than $2 billion to the public entities that used it to get access to this information. And so we were doing pretty well when I left office. And I think that, all these trends have continued, but we do have to face the fact now, sort of what next? I just saw Reed Hundt right before I came out. We were talking about what we did then and the new proposals that have just been made by the FCC to increase the speed and the rate of access to broadband communications. I think that's really important. In America, we opted for a deregulation approach in both the internet and the cell phone business, and we got there quicker than a lot of our competitors. But a lot of our competitors now have better cell phone coverage than we do because they had some regulation to guarantee a framework of universal access, and they also have done better than we have in the speed and universality of access to broadband. So in the United States, I think in general, our entrepreneurial approach is the best one, but we have to realize that there are limits to it, and sometimes we need a framework to make sure that the markets can continue to grow by having more universal access. So I'm hoping that the FCC proposals will do that. Now let me ask you to think just a little bit, going forward about these problems I mentioned and what should be done. I spend a great deal of time now completely out of politics. I don't do any of it unless I'm summoned by the White House or the Secretary of State, someone who once supported us that I have to honor. And I spend most of my time in the non-governmental world. And my foundation has grown very rapidly. We have about 1,500 employees all around the world, and we work in 33 countries setting up healthcare systems. We sell the least expensive